The blood on Miriam Raines's hands belonged to the mayor's son, and by sunrise, the whole town of Santa Fe, New Mexico territory, would be calling for her death. She stood frozen in the dusty bedroom above the saloon, her healing herbs scattered across the floor like fallen leaves, while Thomas Caldwell's body lay cooling on the sweat-soaked sheets. She had come too late. The laudanum addiction had already poisoned his system beyond what any healer could repair, but no one would believe that. They would only see what they wanted to see. A young woman alone with a dead man, her hands covered in his blood from where she had tried desperately to restart his heart. The door crashed open. Mayor Caldwell stood in the entrance, his face transforming from hope to horror in the span of a heartbeat. Behind him crowded half a dozen townsmen, their eyes going wide at the scene before them. "Murderer!" The word tore from the mayor's throat like a wounded animal's cry. "She killed my boy." Miriam stumbled backward, her green eyes filling with tears. "No, I tried to save him. He was already dying when I arrived. The laudanum, it was too much this time. His heart just gave out." "Lies!" Mayor Caldwell lunged forward, but the men behind him caught his arms. "She poisoned him. Everyone knows these herb women are nothing but witches. She wanted money, and when Thomas refused to pay, she killed him." The accusation was absurd. Miriam had never asked for payment beyond what people could spare, often accepting nothing at all. She had tended to the sick and wounded of Santa Fe for 3 years. Ever since arriving as a frightened 20-year-old orphan with nothing but her grandmother's medical knowledge and a desperate need to help others. Now she was 23, and all that goodwill evaporated like morning dew under the scorching New Mexico sun. "Search her bag," someone shouted. Rough hands seized Miriam's leather satchel, dumping its contents onto the floor. Glass vials rolled across the wooden planks, their labels proclaiming innocent remedies: willow bark for pain, chamomile for sleep, yarrow for wounds. But to the angry mob forming in that cramped room, they might as well have been labeled poison. "Look at this." One man held up a dark bottle. "What is this if not something sinister?" "That's elderberry syrup for coughs," Miriam whispered, but her voice was drowned out by the growing roar of accusation. "String her up," someone cried. "Hang the witch," the words crashed over Miriam like waves, threatening to pull her under. She had seen mob justice before in other towns, other places. Once the bloodlust took hold, there was no reasoning with it. Her legs trembled as hands grabbed at her arms, her dress, her hair. She was going to die, here in this room that smelled of death and unwashed bodies, and no one would speak for her. Then a voice cut through the chaos like a knife through butter, calm and steady and absolutely unyielding. "Let her go." The room fell silent. Men parted reluctantly, and Miriam found herself staring at a tall figure in the doorway. He wore the dust-covered clothes of a man who had been riding hard, his dark hair shadowed by a worn hat. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, gray as a winter storm and just as fierce. "This doesn't concern you, Riley," Mayor Caldwell spat. "Step aside." Riley Garrett did not step aside. Instead, he moved further into the room, his tall frame blocking the only exit. Miriam had seen him around town during the past few weeks, a cowboy who worked at the Henderson Ranch just outside Santa Fe. He kept to himself mostly, but she had noticed him watching her sometimes when she walked through town, his expression thoughtful rather than leering like so many other men. "Actually, Mayor, it concerns me quite a bit," Riley said, his voice carrying a soft drawl that spoke of Texas origins. "Seeing as how I was with Thomas not 3 hours ago, and he was already sweating and shaking something fierce. Told me himself he had taken too much of that medicine the doctor in Albuquerque gave him, said he could not stop taking it, even though he knew it was killing him. You lie to protect her." The mayor's face had gone purple with rage. "Why would my son confide in a drifter cowboy?" "Because I did not judge him," Riley replied quietly. "And because I have seen addiction before in the war. It is not something a man can always control, no matter how much he wants to." Miriam's eyes widened. Riley Garrett had just admitted to a room full of hostile men that he had been with the deceased before death occurred. He was deliberately putting himself in danger to defend her. "Even if Thomas was sick," another townsman interjected, "that does not mean she did not hasten his death. Maybe she wanted to put him out of his misery." "Is that what you think happened, Miss Raines?" Riley turned to look at Miriam directly for the first time, and she felt the full weight of his attention. Those gray eyes seemed to see right through her, past the fear and shock to something deeper. "Tell us exactly what occurred." Miriam swallowed hard, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Mrs. Henderson came to fetch me about an hour after sunset. She said Thomas was in a bad way, shaking and vomiting. When I arrived, he was barely conscious. I tried to give him water, tried to cool his fever, but his heart was racing too fast. I have seen this before in people who take too much laudanum. The body becomes dependent on it and then it turns against you. I did everything I could, but there was nothing to be done. His heart just stopped." "And why did you not call for the doctor?" Mayor Caldwell demanded. "Because the nearest real doctor is 2 days' ride away in Albuquerque, and Thomas did not have 2 hours, let alone 2 days," Miriam said, fighting to keep the emotion out of her voice. "I am sorry for your loss, Mayor." "Truly I am, but I did not kill your son. His addiction did." "Convenient excuse," someone muttered. Riley held up a hand. "I suggest we let the territorial marshal investigate this properly when he arrives next week. Until then, Miss Raines should be held somewhere safe. And I do mean safe, not at the mercy of a lynch mob." "She can rot in a cell," the mayor growled. "Sheriff, lock her up, and if she tries to escape, shoot her." The sheriff, a rotund man named Tucker who had always seemed kind enough before, grabbed Miriam's arm roughly. "Come on then. Let us get you locked away before folks get any more worked up." As she was dragged from the room, Miriam caught Riley's eye one more time. He gave her the slightest nod, a gesture that seemed to promise this was not over. Then she was being hauled down the stairs and out into the warm September night, where a crowd had already gathered. The walk to the jail was the longest of Miriam's life. People she had helped, people whose children she had nursed through fevers and whose wounds she had tended, now spat at her feet and called her killer. Someone threw a rock that struck her shoulder, sending pain radiating down her arm. Another threw something wet and foul-smelling that splattered across her skirt. "Witch! Murderer! Hang her now and save us all the trouble." The sheriff shoved her through the door of the small jail and into one of the 2 cells, slamming the iron door with a resounding clang. The lock clicked into place, and Miriam finally allowed herself to sink onto the hard cot, her whole body shaking with reaction. She had not killed Thomas Caldwell, but the truth did not matter when a town wanted someone to blame. The night passed in fits and starts, sleep impossible with the sound of angry voices outside and the fear clawing at her chest. By morning, Miriam's eyes were red and swollen from crying, her throat raw from thirst. The sheriff brought her a cup of water and a hard biscuit but would not meet her eyes. "I am sorry, miss," he muttered, "but orders are orders." "Am I to have a trial?" Miriam asked hoarsely. "Marshal will be here in 6 days. He will decide." 6 days, it might as well have been 6 years. Miriam knew the odds of her surviving that long were slim. The cell had one small window high up on the wall, and through it she could hear the sounds of the town going about its business. But underneath, the normal chatter was something darker, an undercurrent of violence waiting to erupt. She was dozing fitfully when the door to the jail opened again. Miriam looked up, expecting the sheriff, but instead found herself staring at Riley Garrett. He carried a basket covered with a cloth and wore an expression of grim determination. "What are you doing here?" the sheriff demanded. "Bringing the prisoner some proper food," Riley said calmly, "and checking to make sure she is being treated humanely. The mayor will not like this. The mayor does not dictate who I speak to." Riley set the basket down and turned to face the sheriff fully. "Unless Santa Fe has suddenly abandoned all pretense of law and justice, Miss Raines is accused, not convicted. She deserves to be treated accordingly." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Fine. 15 minutes, but I will be right outside." Once they were alone, Riley approached the cell bars. Up close, Miriam could see he was younger than she had initially thought, probably around 26 or 27. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of hard living, and a scar along his jaw that suggested violence in his past. But his hands were gentle as he passed items through the bars: fresh bread, cheese, apples, and a canteen of clean water. "You did not have to do this," Miriam whispered. "Yes, I did." Riley pulled up a chair and sat down, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "What is happening here is wrong, and I will not stand by and watch an innocent woman be railroaded into a noose." "You do not know I am innocent." "Yes, I do." His gray eyes were steady on hers. "I have seen killers, Miss Raines. I fought in the war, saw men who could take a life without a second thought. You are not one of them. What you are is a healer who tried to save a dying man and got blamed when you could not work a miracle." Tears pricked Miriam's eyes again. "No one else believes that. Then they are fools." Riley leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "I spoke to Mrs. Henderson this morning. She confirmed that Thomas had been sick for weeks, getting worse every day. She also said he had been buying laudanum from that traveling medicine man who came through town last month, buying it in quantities no person should consume. The problem is, Mrs. Henderson is too frightened of the mayor to speak publicly. So what good does her testimony do me if she will not share it where it matters? I am working on that." Riley paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Miss Raines, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything at all, that happened in that room that could be construed as suspicious? Anything the mayor could use against you?" Miriam thought back to those desperate minutes. "I used a knife to cut away his shirt so I could better see his chest, check his heart. Maybe they will say I meant to stab him, but the knife is still in my bag clean. And I tried to force water down his throat when he was barely conscious. Maybe they will claim I was trying to drown him or poison him. Anyone with sense would see those as the actions of someone trying to help," Riley said firmly. "But sense is in short supply right now. The mayor is using his grief as a weapon, turning the whole town against you. He has always been a vindictive man, and now he has an outlet for that vindictiveness. Why are you helping me?" The question burst from Miriam before she could stop it. "You barely know me. You are risking the anger of the whole town, maybe even your job. Why?" Riley was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because 3 years ago, I watched an innocent man hang in a town in Texas. He was accused of stealing horses, and the evidence against him was thin at best. But the local rancher wanted someone to blame for his losses, and this man was convenient. I was too much of a coward to speak up. I told myself it was not my business, that I was just passing through. I watched them put the rope around his neck and listened to him proclaim his innocence right up until the moment they dropped him. 2 months later, they caught the real thief. The innocent man was already 6 feet under, and there was nothing anyone could do to give him his life back. He stood abruptly, pacing to the small window and back. "I swore that day I would never stand silent again when I saw injustice. So that is why I am helping you, Miss Raines, because you are innocent and because I will not have another death on my conscience." Miriam felt something shift in her chest, a warmth spreading through the cold fear that had gripped her since last night. Riley Garrett was risking everything for a principal, for a stranger for her. It was more than anyone had ever done for her before. "Thank you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, thank you for believing me." Riley returned to the cell bars, reaching through to briefly touch her hand. The contact was brief but electric, sending a jolt up her arm. "I am not going to let anything happen to you," he said with quiet intensity. "That is a promise." The sheriff poked his head back in. "Time's up, Garrett." Riley nodded but did not immediately leave. "I will be back tomorrow," he told Miriam, "and I will be working on finding more people willing to speak the truth. Hold on, Miss Raines. Please just hold on." After he left, Miriam ate the food he had brought, each bite tasting of hope. Riley Garrett believed her. It should not matter so much, the opinion of one cowboy against an entire town. But somehow it did. It mattered more than anything. The next 3 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Each night, Miriam listened to the sound of drunken men gathering outside the jail, their voices growing louder and more threatening. Twice the sheriff had to fire a warning shot to disperse them. During the day, she could hear the hammering of wood and knew with sick certainty that they were building a gallows in the town square. Riley came every day, bringing food and news. He had convinced Mrs. Henderson to speak to the territorial marshal when he arrived, though she still refused to make a public statement. He had also found the saloon keeper who could testify that Thomas had been drinking heavily before Miriam arrived, and a ranch hand who had seen Thomas purchasing laudanum from a questionable source. "It is not enough," Miriam said on the 4th day. "Even if the marshal believes me, the town wants blood. The mayor has been giving speeches about justice and protecting the community from dangerous elements. He is painting me as some kind of evil force that needs to be eliminated." Riley's jaw clenched. "I know. I have heard the speeches. He is working people into a frenzy, making sure that even if you are found innocent, you will never be safe here again." "Maybe I should just confess," Miriam said dully. "At least then it would be over quickly." "No." Riley's voice was sharp. "Do not even think like that. We are going to get you out of this, legally and properly. You are going to walk out of here a free woman. And then what? Even if by some miracle I am cleared, I can never practice healing again. No one will trust me. I will have to leave Santa Fe, start over somewhere else where no one knows what happened. Then I will go with you." Miriam's head snapped up. "What?" Riley looked almost surprised by his own words, but he did not take them back. "If you have to leave, I will go with you. Make sure you get somewhere safe. Help you start over. You cannot just abandon your life here because of me." "My life here?" Riley laughed without humor. "I am a drifter cowboy who takes jobs where I can find them. I have no ties to this place, no family waiting for me. Before I came to Santa Fe 6 weeks ago, I was in Colorado. Before that, Kansas. Before that, Missouri. I go where the wind takes me, Miss Raines. Might as well let it take me somewhere where I can actually do some good." Miriam stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. He was not just some cowboy playing hero. He was a man adrift, searching for purpose, for redemption. And somehow, in trying to save her, he had found a piece of what he was looking for. "You barely know me," she said softly. "I know enough." Riley's gray eyes were intense. "I know you are kind. I know you are brave. I know you dedicated your life to helping others, asking nothing in return. I know you deserve better than what this town is trying to do to you. And I know that every time I see you, Something in my chest tightens in a way it never has before. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Miriam's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Riley, the door burst open. The sheriff rushed in, his face pale. "Garrett, you need to get out of here, now." "What is happening?" "The mayor's called a town meeting. He is saying they do not need to wait for the marshal. Says they have all the evidence they need to know Miss Raines is guilty. He is calling for an immediate hanging." Ice flooded Miriam's veins. This was it then. The mob was finally coming for her. Riley stood so fast his chair clattered backward. "You cannot let them do this, Tucker. You are the law in this town. Stand up to them." The sheriff looked torn, fear and duty warring on his face. "I am one man with a gun. They are 50 men with rope and rage. What exactly do you expect me to do?" "Your job," Riley's voice cracked like a whip. "You are sworn to protect prisoners in your custody. Or does that oath mean nothing?" Before the sheriff could answer, the sound of marching feet echoed from outside. Miriam pressed herself against the back wall of her cell as the jail door was flung wide. Mayor Caldwell strode in, followed by a crowd of grim-faced men carrying torches, despite it being mid-afternoon. "Hand over the prisoner, Tucker," the mayor commanded. "Now, Mayor, let us think about this," the sheriff began, but his voice was weak. "We are done thinking. We are done waiting. My son is dead and his killer will pay the price. Now give me the key to that cell or we will break it down." Riley stepped in front of the cell, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. "You will have to go through me first." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mayor Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "You are choosing the wrong side, Cowboy. Step aside, or we will consider you an accomplice." "I am choosing the side of justice," Riley said evenly. "Miss Raines deserves a fair trial. The territorial marshal will be here in 2 days. 2 days is not too long to wait to make sure you are not hanging an innocent woman." "She is not innocent," the mayor roared. "She had opportunity, she had means, and she has been filling my boy's head with her herbs and remedies for weeks. Who knows what poison she slipped him?" "Your son was suffering from laudanum addiction," Riley shot back. "He told me himself. He died because his body could not handle the amount of drugs he was consuming, not because of anything Miss Raines did. And if you had been paying attention to your son instead of your political ambitions, maybe you would have noticed he was in trouble and gotten him real help." The mayor's face went from red to white. For a moment, Miriam thought he might strike Riley. Instead, he turned to the crowd. "You all hear this. He admits he was with Thomas before he died. Maybe he is the one who gave my son the fatal dose. Maybe he and the witch are working together." "Now that is just nonsense," the sheriff interjected weakly, but the damage was done. The crowd's hostility, formerly focused entirely on Miriam, now expanded to include Riley. Men began to mutter among themselves, hands reaching for weapons. "Last chance, Garrett," the mayor said coldly. "Step aside." "No." Everything happened at once. 3 men rushed forward to grab Riley. He managed to land a solid punch on one before the other 2 dragged him away from the cell. The sheriff made a half-hearted attempt to intervene but was quickly shouldered aside. Mayor Caldwell snatched the keys from the wall and strode toward Miriam's cell. "Stop," Miriam screamed. "Please just stop. I will confess, I will say whatever you want, just leave him alone." But her words were lost in the chaos. The cell door swung open, and rough hands grabbed her arms, hauling her out into the main room. She could see Riley struggling against the men holding him, blood running from a cut above his eye. "Riley!" She tried to reach for him, but more hands seized her, dragging her toward the door. "I am not letting them do this." Riley wrenched one arm free and landed another punch. "Miriam, fight them." But there were too many, and they were too strong. Miriam found herself being pulled out into the dusty street, the afternoon sun blinding after days in the dim cell. The crowd surged around her, a living thing of anger and hate. She could smell sweat and whiskey and fury. They dragged her toward the town square, where the gallows stood like a dark monument to frontier justice. Miriam's legs gave out, and she stumbled, only to be hauled upright again. This was really happening. They were going to kill her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then a shot rang out. The crowd froze. Miriam looked up through her tangled hair to see Riley standing in the street, his gun pointed at the sky. The men who had been holding him lay groaning on the ground behind him. Blood ran down his face and his shirt was torn, but his hand was steady. "Let her go," he said quietly. In the sudden silence, his voice carried clearly. "Right now." "You are outnumbered, boy," someone called out. "Maybe so." Riley lowered the gun to point directly at Mayor Caldwell. "But I can promise you I will not miss at this range. Is your revenge worth the mayor's life? Because that is what it will cost." Mayor Caldwell had gone pale. "You would not dare. Try me." There was something in Riley's eyes, something cold and hard that spoke of a man who had killed before and would do so again if necessary. "I have already drawn my line, Mayor. I will not cross it for you or anyone else. Miss Raines is innocent, and I will defend her with my life if that is what it takes." "He is bluffing," someone said, but no one moved forward. Riley shifted his aim slightly and fired. The bullet struck the ground inches from the mayor's feet, sending up a spray of dust. Mayor Caldwell jumped backward with a yelp. "Does that feel like a bluff?" Riley asked. The standoff might have ended there in blood and death, if not for the sound of horses approaching at a gallop. Everyone turned to see 3 riders coming down the main street, and even from a distance, Miriam could see the glint of a silver star on one man's chest. "That is the territorial marshal," the sheriff said, relief flooding his voice. "He is early." The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. The marshal was a lean man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that took in the entire scene in one sweep. "What exactly is going on here?" he demanded. Everyone started talking at once, accusations and justifications flying through the air. The marshal held up a hand. "One at a time." "Sheriff Tucker, as the law in this town, you speak first." The sheriff explained the situation as fairly as he could, though Miriam noticed he glossed over his own failure to protect his prisoner. When he finished, the marshal turned to Riley. "And you are Riley Garrett, sir?" "I work at the Henderson Ranch." Riley had not lowered his gun. "I am sorry for the dramatics, but they were about to lynch an innocent woman without trial. That is a serious accusation. Look around you, Marshal. They built gallows and dragged her from her cell. What would you call it?" The marshal's expression hardened. He turned to Mayor Caldwell. "Is this true? Were you planning to execute this woman without due process? My son is dead because of her." The mayor's voice cracked with emotion. "What father would not seek justice?" "Justice and vengeance are not the same thing, Mayor. We have laws in this territory for a reason." The marshal dismounted and walked over to where Miriam was still being held. "Let her go, now." The hands released her arms and Miriam swayed, barely able to stand. Riley was there instantly, his gun finally lowered, his arm supporting her waist. "I have you," he murmured. "You are safe now." The marshal spent the next hour interviewing witnesses. He spoke to Mrs. Henderson, who finally found the courage to tell the truth about Thomas's addiction when faced with a federal lawman. He examined Thomas's body and the contents of Miriam's medical bag. He questioned the saloon keeper and the ranch hands who had seen Thomas's declining state. And through it all, Riley stayed at Miriam's side, a solid presence that kept her grounded. Finally, the marshal called everyone together in front of the jail. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, I find no grounds to charge Miriam Raines with murder or any other crime. Thomas Caldwell died of an overdose of laudanum, a tragedy but not a crime. Miss Raines attempted to render medical aid and failed through no fault of her own. She is free to go. Mayor Caldwell's face crumpled. No, no, that cannot be right. Someone has to pay for my boy's death. The person responsible for your son's death was your son, the marshal said, not unkindly. I am sorry for your loss, Mayor. Truly I am. But punishing an innocent woman will not bring him back. It will only add another tragedy to the first. This is not over, the mayor said, his voice shaking with rage. She might be free by law, but she is not welcome in this town. No one will come to her for healing. No one will sell her supplies. We will drive her out, mark my words. That is your right, the marshal acknowledged. But if any harm comes to Miss Raines, I will hold you personally responsible. Do I make myself clear? The mayor did not answer, just turned and stalked away. The crowd began to disperse, most looking disappointed that there would be no hanging today. Soon only Miriam, Riley, the marshal, and the sheriff remained. Thank you, Miriam said to the marshal. You saved my life. Thank Mr. Garrett here, the marshal replied. If he had not held off that mob long enough for me to arrive, you would be dead. That took real courage, son. And real skill with a gun. Where did you learn to shoot like that? The war, sir. I was a sharpshooter for the Union. The marshal nodded thoughtfully. Ever considered law work? The territory could use men with your sense of justice and your nerve. Riley glanced at Miriam. Thank you, sir, but I think I have other plans. Once the marshal and sheriff had left, Miriam and Riley stood alone in the street. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Miriam realized she was still leaning against Riley, his arm still around her waist, and she should probably step away. But she did not want to. After days of fear and isolation, his solid warmth was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. You were incredible, she said softly. You could have been killed. So could you? Riley's voice was rough. When I saw them dragging you toward those gallows, he stopped, swallowing hard. I cannot explain what I felt, like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I knew in that moment I would do anything at all to keep you safe. Miriam looked up at him, at this man who had stood against an entire town for her. His gray eyes were intense, full of emotion he was not quite managing to hide. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk so much for me? Because I am falling in love with you, Riley said simply. I think I have been since the first time I saw you, walking through town with your medical bag, stopping to help a child who had scraped her knee. You did not hesitate, did not ask if her family could pay. You just helped because that is who you are, and every time I have seen you since, every conversation we have had, that feeling has only grown stronger. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But Miriam, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. Miriam's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in days, they were not tears of fear. I think I am falling in love with you too, she admitted. You are the only person who believed in me, the only one who stood up when everyone else was ready to watch me die. How could I not fall for you? Riley's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears. What do you want to do now? The mayor meant what he said. They will make your life here miserable. You could stay and fight for your place, or you could leave and start fresh somewhere else. Whatever you choose, I will be with you. Miriam thought about Santa Fe, about the 3 years she had spent building a practice here, helping people, making a life for herself. But she also thought about the faces in that mob, people she had trusted who had been ready to hang her. That trust was gone now, burned away by fear and anger. Even if some people might eventually accept her innocence, the shadow of suspicion would always remain. "I want to leave," she said. "I want to go somewhere where people do not know what happened here, where I can heal without everyone watching for signs of malice. But Riley, you do not have to give up your job, your life here for me. I can manage on my own." "I know you can," Riley said. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. But I do not want you to have to manage alone, and I am not giving up anything important. Like I said, I am a drifter. I have been searching for something worth staying still for, and I think I just found it." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Miriam did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the promise of something good after so much darkness. Their lips met softly, a gentle brush that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Riley's arms came around her, holding her close but not tight, letting her know she was safe and cherished. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Riley rested his forehead against hers. "Where should we go?" "West," Miriam said. "I've heard there are mining towns in California that need medical help. Places where women with healing skills are welcomed because they are too far from real doctors. California it is." Riley smiled, and Miriam realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger and lighter. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning, if possible. I do not want to spend another night in this town." "Tomorrow morning," Riley agreed. "I will get supplies and horses. You gather your things. We will leave at first light." They spent the night at the boarding house, where Miriam had been renting a room, carefully separated into different rooms to preserve propriety, despite the landlady's disapproving looks. Miriam packed her few belongings, her medical supplies, several changes of clothes, her grandmother's journal of remedies, and the small amount of money she had saved. It did not amount to much, barely enough to start over with. But it was a start. Riley knocked on her door before dawn. He looked more rested than he had the previous day, the cut above his eye already scabbing over. He carried saddlebags and a bedroll, everything he owned in the world apparently. "Ready?" he asked. Miriam took one last look around the room where she had lived for 3 years. She felt no sadness leaving it behind, only relief and anticipation for what lay ahead. "Ready." They left Santa Fe as the sun rose, riding west on horses Riley had purchased from the Henderson Ranch. The morning air was cool and clean, smelling of sage and possibility. No one came to see them off. No one even seemed to notice their departure. Miriam was just as glad. She wanted no more confrontations, no more accusations. She just wanted to leave this chapter of her life behind and start a new one. They rode in comfortable silence for the first few hours, both lost in their own thoughts. The landscape gradually changed from the high desert around Santa Fe to more rugged terrain as they headed toward the mountains. Around midday, Riley called a halt near a stream to let the horses drink and rest. "How far do you think we can get today?" Miriam asked, stretching her stiff muscles. She was not an experienced rider, and already she could feel the beginning of saddle soreness. "Maybe 20 miles if we push," Riley said. He noticed her wince and his expression softened. "Or we could go slower, make it 15. There is no rush. We have all the time in the world." "All the time in the world," Miriam repeated softly. "That sounds wonderful." They made camp that evening in a sheltered canyon, with Riley efficiently building a fire and preparing food while Miriam tended to the horses. It felt strange and intimate, making camp together like an old married couple, even though they had only admitted their feelings yesterday. But it also felt right, natural, as if they had been doing this for years. After eating, they sat by the fire as twilight deepened into full dark. The sky overhead was a blanket of stars, more than Miriam had ever seen in town. She leaned against Riley's shoulder and his arm came around her automatically. "Tell me about yourself," Miriam said. "Where you come from, what your life was like before Santa Fe. I want to know everything." Riley was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently playing with a strand of her hair that had escaped her braid. "I grew up in Texas," he began. "Small ranch outside of Austin. My father raised cattle and I was expected to do the same. But then the war came and I enlisted even though my father wanted me to stay. Told him I had to fight for what was right. He never forgave me for choosing the Union side in a Confederate state." "That must have been hard," Miriam said softly. "It was. But I could not fight for slavery, not even for family loyalty. So I left and did not go back. Spent 4 years in the war, most of it as a sharpshooter like I told the marshal. Saw things no man should see, did things I am not proud of. When it ended, I could not settle down. Could not imagine going back to quiet ranch life after all that. So I drifted. Worked cattle drives, hired on at ranches for a season here and there, kept moving west. Thought maybe if I moved far enough I could outrun the memories. Did it work? No." Riley's voice was sad. "The memories always followed. But somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to outrun them and started trying to make up for them instead. That is why I could not stand by and watch you hang. I have too much blood on my conscience already, even if it was legal killing in wartime. I could not add yours to the tally." Miriam turned to look up at him. "You are a good man, Riley Garrett. Whatever you did in the war, you did because you believed it was right. And what you did for me was heroic. Do not let the past define who you are now." "That is what I am trying to do," Riley said. "Starting with you, starting with this." He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper. Miriam felt heat pooling in her belly, her hands coming up to grip his shirt. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should stop," Riley said reluctantly. "I want to do this right. Court you properly. Marry you before anything else." Miriam knew he was right, knew that propriety demanded they wait. But propriety had not stood up for her in Santa Fe. Propriety had not risked its life to save hers. Still, she appreciated that Riley wanted to honor her that way. "How long until we reach California?" she asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4, depending on how fast we travel and what conditions we hit. "And will there be towns along the way? Towns with churches?" Riley caught her meaning and his eyes widened. "Miriam, are you saying—" "I am saying I do not want to wait 4 weeks," Miriam said firmly. "I do not want to spend a month pretending we are just traveling companions when we both know we are so much more than that. Marry me, Riley. Soon. As soon as we find a town with a preacher." A slow smile spread across Riley's face. "You are sure? We have only known each other a matter of days." "I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. You saved my life, Riley. But more than that, you believed in me when no one else did. You stood against an entire town for me. That kind of loyalty, that kind of goodness, that is what I want in a husband. So yes, I am sure." "Are you?" "Since the moment I saw them dragging you toward those gallows and knew I would die before I let them hurt you," Riley said. "Yes, Miriam Raines. I will marry you. Tomorrow if we can find a preacher. The day after if we cannot. As soon as possible." They sealed the promise with another kiss, this one full of joy and anticipation. When they finally settled down to sleep, each in their own bedroll but close enough to reach across and hold hands, Miriam felt more content than she had in years. Her reputation was ruined, her home was gone, her possessions fit in 2 saddlebags. But she had Riley, and somehow that was enough. They found their preacher 3 days later in a small town called Las Lunas. He was an elderly circuit preacher who happened to be passing through, and he agreed to marry them for $10, and no questions asked. The ceremony was simple, held in the church with only the preacher's wife as witness. Miriam wore her cleanest dress and had braided wildflowers into her hair. Riley had shaved and wore a clean shirt, looking nervous and happy in equal measure. "Do you, Riley Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. "I do," Riley said firmly, his gray eyes never leaving Miriam's face. "And do you, Miriam Raines, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." Miriam's voice was strong despite the tears in her eyes. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Riley pulled Miriam close and kissed her thoroughly, not caring that they had an audience. When they broke apart, the preacher's wife was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Such a lovely couple," she sniffed. "Where are you two headed?" "California," Riley said, his arm around Miriam's waist. "To start a new life." "Well, may the Lord bless your journey and your marriage." The preacher handed them a marriage certificate, officially documenting their union. "And may you have many happy years together." They stayed the night at a small inn in Las Lunas, paying for a room as Mr. and Mrs. Garrett. The innkeeper had no idea they had just been married hours earlier, and Miriam was grateful for the anonymity. After so much scrutiny in Santa Fe, it was wonderful to be just another couple passing through. That night, Riley carried Miriam over the threshold of their room, making her laugh. He set her down gently, his expression suddenly nervous. "I've never done this before," he admitted. "Been with a woman, I mean. In the biblical sense, the war and the drifting never left much room for relationships." "Neither have I," Miriam confessed. "My grandmother raised me to save myself for marriage. I hope I will not disappoint you." "Impossible," Riley said softly. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Whatever happens tonight, we will figure it out together. That is what marriage is, right? Figuring things out together." "Together," Miriam agreed and drew him down into a kiss. They took their time, learning each other slowly in the flickering candlelight. Riley was patient and gentle, always making sure Miriam was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. There was some awkwardness, some fumbling, but there was also laughter and tenderness, and a sense of rightness that made everything perfect despite the imperfections. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Miriam's head on Riley's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." Riley's hand stroked through her hair. "My wife, my husband." Miriam smiled against his skin. She had been married less than a day, but already she could not imagine her life any other way. They continued west over the following weeks, taking their time now that there was no urgency to reach their destination. They stopped to help a family whose wagon had broken down, with Riley repairing the axle while Miriam tended to their sick baby. They spent a night with an Apache family who taught them better ways to travel through the desert. They marveled at the landscape as it changed from desert to mountains to eventually the forests of California. In a mining town called Grass Valley, nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills, they finally stopped. The town was rough and crowded, full of miners seeking their fortune in the goldfields. But it also desperately needed medical care, and the local businessmen were delighted when Miriam offered her services. "We had a doctor," the general store owner explained, "but he moved on to San Francisco where the money is better. We have been making do with whatever patent medicines we can get, but what we really need is someone who knows what they are doing. If you are willing to stay, Mrs. Garrett, I can guarantee you will have plenty of work." "What about you?" Miriam asked Riley that evening as they settled into a rented room above the saloon, the only accommodation available in the crowded town. "Will you be able to find work here?" "Already have," Riley said with satisfaction. There is a ranch about 5 miles outside town. The owner is looking for men who know cattle and can handle trouble. Apparently claim jumpers and thieves are common problems around here. Pay is good, and he said once I prove myself, there might be opportunity for something more permanent. They fell into a rhythm over the following months. Riley worked at the ranch during the day, while Miriam established her medical practice. At first, people were skeptical of a woman healer, but her skill quickly won them over. She set broken bones, delivered babies, treated fevers and injuries with herbs and knowledge passed down from her grandmother. Word spread, and soon people were coming from miles around to see the healer in Grass Valley. Riley proved himself just as capable on the ranch. His steady hand with a gun and his calm demeanor in a crisis made him valuable, and within 3 months, the owner offered him a partnership in the operation. It was a chance for stability, for putting down real roots, and Riley accepted immediately. A year after arriving in Grass Valley, Riley and Miriam had saved enough money to buy a small house on the edge of town. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs. Miriam set up a proper surgery in one room, while Riley built furniture for the rest. They planted a garden where Miriam could grow her medicinal herbs. They adopted a stray dog who showed up on their porch one day and refused to leave. It was a good life, simple but fulfilling. They worked hard during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, their love deepening with every shared sunset and whispered conversation. Miriam's nightmares about Santa Fe faded, replaced by dreams of the future. 2 years after their wedding, Miriam discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but wanted to be certain before telling Riley. When she finally shared the news, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Miriam asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy, Miriam, I am ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic." Riley set her down carefully as if she might break. "Are you feeling well? Do you need to rest? Should you stop working?" Miriam laughed. "I am pregnant, not dying. I will keep working as long as I am able. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time, you know." But Riley fussed over her anyway, making sure she did not lift anything heavy, that she ate enough, that she got plenty of rest. It was endearing even when it was excessive. Miriam let him fuss because she knew it came from love and a little bit of fear. They had built something precious together, and Riley was terrified of losing it. Their son was born on a warm September evening. Exactly 3 years after the night Thomas Caldwell had died and changed both their lives forever. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Miriam wondered if she would survive it. But with Riley holding her hand and a midwife from town assisting, she brought their baby boy into the world as the sun set outside their window. "He is perfect," Riley whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "Miriam, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Riley Garrett, after the man whose death had brought them together and the father who would raise him with love. It felt right to honor that connection, to acknowledge that sometimes terrible things can lead to beautiful outcomes. Thomas was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Sarah, and then 3 years after that by another son named James. Their house seemed to shrink as their family grew, but somehow they made it work. Riley expanded their home, adding rooms and a larger porch where the children could play. Miriam reduced her medical practice to part-time, focusing on her family while still helping those who needed her. The years passed in a blur of birthday parties and first steps, scraped knees and bedtime stories. Riley proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful and always present. He taught Thomas to ride and rope, read stories to Sarah until she fell asleep, carried James on his shoulders around the property. Miriam would watch them sometimes and feel her heart swell with gratitude for this life they had built. When Thomas turned 5, he asked a question at dinner one evening that made both his parents freeze. "Papa, Mama, why does no one from your families ever visit? Do I not have grandparents?" Riley and Miriam exchanged glances. They had known this conversation would come eventually, but it was still difficult. "My parents died when I was young," Miriam said gently. "Your papa's parents live far away in Texas and we do not see them." "Why not?" "Sometimes families disagree about things," Riley said carefully. "And sometimes those disagreements mean people live separate lives. But that is okay, because family is not just about blood. It is about the people who love you and take care of you. You have me and your mama, and you have your brother and sister. That is a pretty good family, do not you think?" Thomas considered this seriously. "Yes," he finally decided, "but I still wish you had more family so I could have more cousins to play with." Riley laughed and ruffled his son's hair. "Fair enough, but you know what? The Hendersons from the ranch are coming over this weekend, and they are bringing their kids. That is almost as good as cousins." It was true that they had built a chosen family in Grass Valley. The ranch owner and his wife had become close friends, as had several families in town. Miriam's medical practice had earned her respect and affection from the community. People who had been strangers were now like family, celebrating holidays together and supporting each other through hard times. The only shadow on their happiness came 10 years after they had left New Mexico, when a letter arrived addressed to Riley. The postmark said Santa Fe. Riley stared at it for a long moment before opening it, his face tense. "What is it?" Miriam asked, concerned. "A letter from the territorial marshal, the one who saved you." Riley scanned the contents, his expression growing more serious. "He says Mayor Caldwell died last month. Before he died, he apparently confessed to his remaining family that he had known all along you were innocent. His wife found evidence that Thomas had been buying laudanum for months, and the mayor had known about it but chosen to ignore it because he did not want the scandal. After Thomas died, it was easier to blame you than accept his own failure as a father." Miriam sat down heavily. "So he tried to have me killed to cover up his own guilt." "Yes." Riley crumpled the letter. "The marshal wanted us to know in case we ever wanted to return to Santa Fe. He says your name has been cleared publicly, and there are people who want to apologize for how you were treated." "Do you want to go back?" Miriam asked quietly. "No." Riley's answer was immediate. "Santa Fe is the past. This is our home now. These people are our family. I have no desire to revisit a place that nearly killed you, apologies or not." Miriam felt relief wash through her. "I am glad." "I feel the same way, but it is good to know the truth finally came out." They burned the letter that evening and never spoke of Santa Fe again. The past was closed and they were firmly focused on the future. That future brought more joy than either of them had dared to imagine. Riley became a full partner in the ranch and eventually bought out the original owner when he retired. It was now Garrett Ranch, a successful operation that employed a dozen men and ran several hundred head of cattle. Miriam continued her medical practice, training younger women in healing arts and becoming known as the best healer for 100 miles. Their children grew into fine young adults. Thomas followed his father into ranching, showing a natural talent for animal husbandry. Sarah surprised everyone by wanting to study to become a real doctor, not just a healer. And they sent her to medical school in San Francisco, despite the raised eyebrows from those who did not think women belonged in medicine. James proved to have his father's steady aim and his mother's compassion. eventually becoming a lawman dedicated to justice. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Riley and Miriam sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the California sky in shades of gold and pink. Their children were all visiting with families of their own now, their grandchildren playing in the yard. The sound of laughter drifted through the warm evening air. "Did you ever imagine this?" Miriam asked, her hand in Riley's. "When you were standing in that jail in Santa Fe, gun drawn against an angry mob," Riley was quiet for a moment. "No," he finally said. "I did not let myself imagine past getting you to safety. I just knew I could not let them hurt you. Everything after that has been a gift I did not expect." "I was so scared," Miriam admitted. "I thought I was going to die and I felt so alone. Then you stepped in front of that cell and suddenly I was not alone anymore. You gave me hope when I had none left." "You gave me purpose," Riley replied. "I had been drifting for so long, not really living, just existing. You gave me a reason to stand still, to put down roots, to build something lasting. You gave me this." He gestured at the home, the family, the life they had created together. "We gave each other this," Miriam corrected. "It took both of us to build it." One of their grandchildren, Thomas's eldest boy, came running up to the porch. "Grandpa Riley, will you tell us the story about how you and Grandma Miriam met? Papa says it is a good one." Riley and Miriam exchanged glances. Over the years, they had told a sanitized version of their meeting, leaving out the worst parts. But looking at their grandchild's eager face, Miriam suddenly wanted him to know the truth. Not the fear and the hate, but the courage and the love. "It is a good story," Riley agreed, pulling the boy onto his lap. "Your grandmother was accused of something she did not do and a whole town turned against her. But I knew she was innocent, so I stood up for her even though everyone told me I was wrong." "Were you scared?" the boy asked. "Terrified," Riley said honestly. "But sometimes being brave means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. And the right thing was protecting your grandmother, because even then I knew she was special. I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her." "And then you got married and had babies." "Eventually," Miriam said with a laugh. "First we had to travel all the way to California. It was quite an adventure." As the evening deepened, they told the story to their gathered family, the children and grandchildren listening with rapt attention. They told of fear and courage, of injustice and the one man who stood against it, of love found in the darkest moment and a life built on that foundation. They told of hard work and sacrifice, of building a home and a family from nothing but determination and devotion to each other. When the story ended, Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "Mama, Papa, that is beautiful. You saved each other." "Yes," Miriam agreed, looking at Riley with all the love in her heart. "We did." Later that night, after the family had retired to their various rooms and guest houses, Riley and Miriam lay in their bed. Riley's hand found Miriam's in the darkness, their fingers intertwining automatically after 25 years of practice. "I would do it all again," Riley said softly. "Every moment, every decision, everything that brought me to you. I would do it all again without hesitation. Even the parts where you almost got killed standing up for me, especially those parts. They were worth it to get here, to have this life with you." Miriam rolled over to face him, able to make out his features in the moonlight streaming through the window. Time had added lines to his face and silver to his hair, but his gray eyes still looked at her with the same intensity they had shown in that Santa Fe jail. "I love you, Riley Garrett. I have loved you from the moment you stepped in front of that cell and refused to move. Thank you for believing in me when no one else would. I love you, Miriam Garrett. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe in something again. You saved my soul just as surely as I saved your life." They kissed, a soft, lingering kiss that held 25 years of partnership, passion, and unwavering devotion. Outside their window, the California night was peaceful and full of stars, stretching endlessly above the life they had built together. The next morning, Riley was up early to help with ranch work. At 61, he was not as young as he used to be, but he was still strong and capable. Miriam, at 58, still saw patients several times a week, her knowledge and experience making her invaluable to the community. They worked side by side in the garden before Riley headed out, him pulling weeds while she harvested herbs. It was a comfortable routine born of decades of partnership. "I was thinking," Riley said casually, "maybe this winter we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Sarah can handle your patients for a while, and Thomas knows how to run the ranch. We could go to San Francisco, stay in a fancy hotel, see the city." Miriam smiled. "That sounds wonderful, though I am not sure I remember how to be just the two of us anymore. We have been parents and grandparents for so long. All the more reason to practice," Riley said with a grin. "Besides, I want to take my beautiful wife somewhere nice and spoil her rotten. You deserve it after putting up with me for 25 years. "Putting up with you has been my greatest joy," Miriam said truthfully. She stood and brushed dirt from her skirt. "But I will never say no to being spoiled. San Francisco it is." They never made it to San Francisco that winter. Riley came down with pneumonia in November, likely caught from working outside in the cold rain. Miriam nursed him desperately, using every remedy she knew, calling in the doctor from the next town. For 2 weeks he fought, and for 2 weeks Miriam barely slept, staying by his side constantly. On the 14th day, Riley's fever finally broke. Miriam wept with relief as he opened his eyes and managed a weak smile. "Cannot get rid of me that easily," he whispered. "Do not you ever scare me like that again," Miriam said fiercely, gripping his hand. "I cannot lose you, not now, not ever." "Planning to stick around a while longer," Riley promised. "Still have grandchildren to watch grow up, and I owe you a trip to San Francisco." He recovered slowly, but recover he did. By spring he was back to his usual self, though Miriam insisted he take things easier. They made their trip to San Francisco that summer, staying in the fanciest hotel they could afford and marveling at the bustling city. But what Riley loved most was not the fancy restaurants or the theater shows. It was walking along the waterfront at sunset, Miriam's hand in his, watching the ships come and go. "Thank you," Miriam said as they stood watching the sun sink into the Pacific Ocean. "For what? For this. For everything. For 25 years of adventure and love. For standing up for me when no one else would. For being the best husband and father anyone could ask for. For building this beautiful life with me." Riley pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "The honor has been all mine, Mrs. Garrett. You took a drifter cowboy with no purpose and gave him everything worth living for. I am the one who should be saying thank you." They returned to Grass Valley refreshed and even more in love than before. The near loss had reminded them not to take a single day for granted, and they made sure to tell each other, "I love you," every morning and evening. Years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The Garrett Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the region, and Miriam's medical legacy lived on through Sarah and the other women she had trained. Their family grew and flourished, a testament to the love that had started in the darkest moment of Miriam's life. On their 40th wedding anniversary, they were surrounded by 4 generations of family. Thomas gave a toast, his voice thick with emotion. "To my parents who taught us all what true love and courage look like. Papa, you stood against a whole town for Mama. And together, you built something that will last long after we are all gone. We love you both more than words can say." Everyone raised their glasses, and Riley and Miriam looked at each other with tears in their eyes. 40 years since that terrible night in Santa Fe. 40 years of building a life together. 40 years of love that had never wavered. Worth it, Riley whispered to Miriam. Every moment was worth it. Yes, Miriam agreed, her hand finding his. It absolutely was. They lived to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, still in their home, still in love, still grateful for the chance encounter that had brought them together. Riley was 81 and Miriam 78, their bodies bent with age but their minds and hearts still sharp. On their actual anniversary, they sat on their porch once again, this time in comfortable silence. There was no need for words after 50 years. They knew each other's thoughts, each other's hearts. As the sun set, painting the California sky in familiar shades of gold, Riley squeezed Miriam's hand gently. "If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Not even the scary parts," Miriam asked with a smile. "Especially not the scary parts. They made the good parts that much sweeter." Riley turned to look at her, his gray eyes still full of love. "You are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "You are going blind in your old age," Miriam teased, but she was pleased. "Blind with love, maybe," Riley agreed. "But that is the best kind of blindness." They sat together as darkness fell. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had withstood everything life threw at them. A healer accused of murder and a cowboy who believed in her innocence, now old and content, surrounded by the family and life they had created together. It was more than either of them had dared to dream in that Santa Fe jail cell 50 years ago. But they had dreamed it together, built it together, and lived it together. And that made it perfect. When Riley passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at the age of 83, Miriam held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for standing up for me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life. I will see you again, my love. Wait for me." She lived another 3 years, continuing to garden and see the occasional patient until the very end. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, but they all knew part of her had left with Riley. She often spoke to him as if he were still in the room, telling him about the grandchildren's accomplishments and the great-grandchildren's antics. On a warm September evening, exactly 55 years after the night she and Riley had met, Miriam passed away in her sleep. She was found the next morning with a smile on her face, her hand outstretched as if reaching for someone. They buried her next to Riley on a hill overlooking their ranch. The entire town turned out for the funeral, testament to the lives they had both lived and the love they had shared. Their children spoke of courage and devotion. Their grandchildren spoke of unwavering love and the kind of partnership that only comes once in a lifetime. But it was their youngest great-granddaughter who summed it up best. She was only 6 years old, and she stood at the grave with a handful of wildflowers. "Great-grandma Miriam told me once that great-grandpa Riley saved her life," she said solemnly, "and that she saved his soul. And then they lived happily ever after, just like in fairy tales, except this was real. Real indeed. A healer blamed for a death she did not cause. A cowboy who believed her when no one else would and stood against an entire town to defend her. A love that began in darkness and grew into something bright and lasting, something that produced generations of family and left a legacy of courage and compassion. It was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, it was hard-won, and it was absolutely, completely worth it. From the ashes of accusation and mob justice had risen something beautiful. A love story that would be told for generations. A reminder that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, and that standing up for what is right, even when you stand alone, can change everything. The Garrett family still lives on the ranch today, still tells the story of how it all began, still honors the memory of two people who loved each other enough to build something lasting. And on quiet September evenings, when the sunset paints the California sky in shades of gold, some say you can still see two figures on the old porch, holding hands and watching the day fade into night, together for all eternity.